Hi, hello, welcome to my channel. Today in this session we will see the oogenesis process. How the ova or egg cells are formed and get matured. Right? The formation and maturation of the ova is called what? Oogenesis process. This oogenesis, this formation and maturation process takes place in the Graafian follicle of the ovaries. Generally, this formation process, egg cell formation process, initiated in the embryonic stages only. Millions of egg mother cells or oogonias are present in the ovary at the time of embryo. Okay, in the embryonic stage only, egg mother cells or oogonias are formed in the female embryo ovary. No more oogonias are formed or added after the birth. These oogonias generally they multiply and they form what? Primary oocytes. When we get birth, means when female baby gets birth, at that time primary oocytes are present in the ovary. So these primary oocytes, they start cell division and they enter into the prophase 1 of the meiosis, and this cell division temporarily get arrested in the prophase 1 of the meiosis. So this we have to remember. So when this meiosis 1 will be, means prophase 1 will be continued, we will try to understand. Okay. First, primary oocytes are there. These primary oocytes, they are surrounded by one single layer of granulosa. So these are called primary follicles. Many primary follicles, now primary oocyte is there in the primary follicle. So when female baby gets birth, at that time, how many follicles primary follicles are there? Millions of primary follicles are there in the ovary. But what happens when gets birth to between the puberty time, number of follicles, primary follicles, they get degenerate. Only 60 to 80,000 primary follicles will be left in the each ovary. Okay, so between the birth and puberty. So now what happens? This primary follicle, when puberty attains, primary follicles slowly starts maturing, like they develop like secondary follicle matures like tertiary follicle matures like Graafian follicle. Now what happens? In the Graafian follicle, secondary, this in the primary follicle what is present? Primary oocyte is there. In the secondary follicle what is present? Primary oocyte is there. In the tertiary follicle what is present? Primary oocyte is there. But in the tertiary follicle what happens? Primary oocyte, from the primary oocyte, secondary oocyte will be developed. Means cell division process takes place, secondary oocyte develops. This now in the Graafian follicle, secondary oocyte is there. When Graafian follicle matures, it releases the secondary oocyte. This process is called what? Ovulation process. Okay, let's try to understand in this slide. Primary oocyte is there in the tertiary follicle, right? This tertiary follicle grows and undergoes the unequal meiotic division to form what? Secondary oocyte. In the tertiary follicle what is formed? Secondary oocyte is formed, and as well as one polar body is formed. This secondary oocyte is nothing but the, now we can call it oocyte develops like ovum. This is the ovum, right? So it is the, and polar body's function, we don't know the polar body function, it is unknown. First polar body divides further and degenerates. We don't know whether it divides or degenerates. First polar body may divide or degenerate. So now the tertiary follicle changes into the mature follicle. In the tertiary, this mature follicle is called what? Graafian follicle. In the Graafian follicle what is present? Secondary oocyte is there. So around the secondary oocyte one layer will be formed which is called zona pellucida. Okay. Now what happens when the Graafian follicle completely matures? Then what happens? Ruptures. Now it ruptures and releases the secondary oocyte which is also known as ovum. This process is called ovulation. So this is the Graafian follicle diagram, and you can also observe the zona pellucida layer around the secondary oocyte. Okay. Now these are the steps of the oogenesis process. Oogonia are there. From the oogonia, primary oocyte will be formed. Primary oocytes undergo the meiosis process. We know they form the secondary oocytes and first polar body, and then they grow like, develop like ovum and second polar body. So this is the primary oocyte. From the primary oocyte, secondary oocyte and first polar body will be formed. Then secondary oocyte gives a mature ovum and another polar body, and this first polar body may divide into polar bodies or it may get degenerated. Okay, right. Now let us try to understand the structure of ovum. Ovum is a spherical and non-motile structure, 0.2 millimeters in diameter. Ovum has three membranes. One is the plasma membrane around it, which is called oolemma, innermost layer, then zona pellucida, outer to the plasma membrane, corona radiata, outer layer of the formed follicles. Look at this. This is the corona radiata and this is the zona pellucida, and the innermost layer you can observe the plasma membrane in the structure of ovum. This ovum is a spherical shaped and a non-motile structure, 0.2 millimeters in diameter. Okay. Now let's try to understand the differences between the spermatogenesis and oogenesis process. We know that spermatogenesis occurs in the males, that occurs in testis. So oogenesis process occurs in the ovary, and in the spermatogenesis process limited growth phase is there. But in the oogenesis process, elaborated growth phase is there. In the spermatogenesis process, from the primary spermatocyte, 4 sperm cells will be formed. But in the case of oogenesis, each primary oocyte gives only one ovum. So no polar body formation, here polar bodies are formed. This spermatogenesis process starts at puberty and extends up to the, okay, till the death, senility. So begins at a embryonic stage. This oogenesis process begins at embryonic stage but suspends up to the puberty. We know that cell division process will be arrested, okay, and after the puberty the oogenesis process will be continued. It ceases around the age of 50 in the females. So like this, there are some differences between the spermatogenesis process and oogenesis process. What you have to remember, each primary spermatocyte gives how many sperm cells? 4 sperm cells. Each primary oocyte gives how many ovum? Only one ovum. From one primary spermatocyte, 4 sperms. From primary oocyte, only one ovum. Here no polar body formation. Here polar body formation. This will be continued till death, and this oogenesis process will be ceased at 50 or 55 age. Okay. If you like my session, please like, share and subscribe my channel. Thank you.